various, having begun his career with the Canadian Consulate General in Buffalo, New York in 1998, and later transferring to the Consulate General of Canada in Detroit, Michigan, Mark has held his current position of Consular Officer for 13 years. In this capacity, Mark provides emergency services to Canadian citizens located in the United States of Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky. Mark earned his master's degree in Library and Information Science from SUNY University of Buffalo, earned a bachelor's degree in Political Science from SUNY College at Fredonia in 1997. In 1992, Mark took part in a Rotary Student Exchange Program, completing a year abroad in Belgium, where he learned to parle français. Mark is originally from Buffalo, New York, later immigrating to Canada, and eventually becoming a Canadian citizen in 2008. He makes his home in Tecumseh, where he resides with his wife, Christine, their two cats, Savannah and Jasper, and their dog, Cody. And as we all know, everybody who has pets, that your house is maintained for the care and convenience of your pets. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. I did a little bit late. I actually had a consular emergency this morning. My assistant, her car wouldn't start, so she got stuck on the and get in. So I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to make it. I thought I was going to have to go in and open the office and do all that. So I'm here because I'm a consular officer. Well, I'm here because I'm interested in Rotary first, but I'm a consular officer, what that is consular officers provide assistance to Canadians when they're abroad. So it's a great thing for us right here on the border, because I'm sure all of you pop over the border to shop and go to Roatan. I mean, that's a big border, but you know, the same rules apply, right? You go overseas, something goes awry, that's where consular assistance comes into play. So I just want to, let's see if I can get us over. So there are about 260 service points where we do this. So if you're traveling abroad and you lose your passport, or heaven forbid you get robbed, or anything, I mean, you could have a medical emergency, something like that. That's what consular officers do. I also deal with people who get arrested. If you know, it happens. If you go overseas, you get arrested, and you don't understand the local laws, the local system. Maybe you don't even speak the local language. That's not really a problem here with Michigan. But again, Roatan, Mexico, something like that. That you know, if you're going to Honduras, something like that, might be an issue.
Take his number. Take his number.
Yeah, not pointing fingers at you.
She'll probably talk her way out of something.
Yeah.
I'll be right there.
So Global Affairs Canada is actually the ministry that provides these services. One of the other things that we also provide are travel advice. So if you ever went to Global Affairs website, they would have, for every country on the planet, they'll have a what they call TAA, a travel advisory and advice, with the current Canada stance on the level of threat or danger to travelers, advice that you should take for your personal safety, things like that when you're abroad. We also, consular assistance also is a great way to showcase Canada's foreign policy and Canada in action. For example, the wildfires that happened in Hawaii recently, there were 203 Canadians in Hawaii when that happened. So we helped evacuate 203 Canadians from Hawaii when that happened. Some of them lost their passports in the fire, and they had literally nothing. So they just show up and say, "Here I am. I'm Joe Canadian. Help me get back." So that's what we do. We try and put you back together again. We're open 24/7. There is a emergency watch center in Ottawa that is run by Global Affairs. It's staffed 24/7. You can call all the time. There's always people there. They're constantly monitoring what's happening around the world. If you ever see it, it's this ginormous room with, they have about 100 televisions. They're monitoring the news and media from all over the world. I don't know how they can keep it all straight, because there's all this television screens. So anything that's happening, there's an earthquake or a plane crash, or civil unrest, you name it, they're watching that and they're looking at it, and you'd be surprised, there are Canadians everywhere. Everywhere. You think you see something on the news, and go, okay, you just tune it out. But I guarantee you there's a Canadian involved there somewhere. So as I mentioned, we have 260 points of service in 150 different countries. And those are offered out of the embassies of Canada and the consulates general. I work for the Consulate General in Detroit. Just to give you an example, there are 13 offices in the United States that cover the whole US. We're broken down by states. So the one in Detroit covers Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky. So I travel around to all of those 4 states. I particularly enjoy going to Kentucky to the Bourbon Trail from time to time. But yes, I do a lot of outreach just like this to the Canadian groups. There's a lot. You don't see it too much in my states, but like Florida, Arizona, snowbird organizations, there's a lot of Canadians that winter down there. So my counterparts at our offices in Miami or Dallas will meet with Canadians down there to help them. If seniors lose their passports while they're snowbirding, that happens a lot. That's a big chunk of our work. So as I said, some of the things that we do, we offer the travel advice. We also do a lot of assistance for Canadians who reside abroad. So sometimes they need something as simple as notarial services. I'm a notary public for Canada, so I can do that for Canadians who are abroad when they need documents for anything legal. That's a little service that we can provide. Proof of citizenship is a big one. Canadians that are born abroad. So if you're a Canadian citizen and you have a child born overseas, your child's a Canadian, and there's a paperwork process that you go through to do that, and the consulates will help you with that. Voting, that's a big one. We Canadians abroad also have the right to vote. So you can come through us, and we'll have a generic ballot that you can use to vote in Canadian elections. I talked about arrest and detentions. That's probably my big bread and butter. I hate to say it, but in my territory, I have one of the larger portfolios of Canadians incarcerated. I have about 50 at the moment, and they're scattered around those 4 states. So one of the things I also do is I do prison visits. I visit Canadians that are in prison, just to make sure that they're getting the medical care. They're not being treated any differently than anyone else because of their citizenship. So I make sure that they get what they're entitled to, like everyone else. So I get a lot of medical questions because Canadians will go to the States, and we're used to our healthcare system here in the US. You don't get that, especially in prisons. You don't get quite the same. So it's a lot. We do advocate for Canadians in prison to get the medical care that they need. I talked about medical assistance and medical evacuation. The Hawaii wildfire was a very good example, but that happens all the time. You may remember a few years ago, mass evacuations from the Middle East, civil unrest. We will organize flights. We will fly thousands and thousands of people out if we have to, and we have done that. In the US, we haven't really had to do that, mainly because the system is so deep. The networks are so close. We have airlines. There's constant flights. So for something it would have to be really catastrophic that you couldn't get home without us making a flight. Even the people in Hawaii, there were still flights to Seattle and Vancouver and things like that, so they could get out. We didn't have to take it to that level. Child abduction, custody disputes, we deal with that too. A Canadian marries an American, for example, and they have a child in the States. Their child is a dual citizen, US Canadian. If their marriage goes south, it falls apart, and one parent goes with the other, it takes the child across the border, you have an international child abduction. Even if it's your child, if you take the child over the border and you didn't have permission to do that, that's an international child abduction. So we look out for children that way, but we get a lot of calls from frantic parents saying, my former spouse ran off with our kid. So that's the sort of thing that we do too. We try and work with the local authorities to, figure out where the child is, and then we have to determine what the regular place of residence is. So whether the child gets to come back to Canada or stay in the States or vice versa. It goes both ways. Sometimes they'll take a child from Canada back to the US, and we have to get them back into Canada. So that's it's messy. So, but this is the stuff that goes on behind the curtain. You don't see this stuff and you hope you never need it, but when you do, be glad it's there. We talked about assistance in cases of crisis and emergencies. The Hawaii one just keeps coming back because that was such a big one of 203 people all in one. And we sent people from all of our offices across the US to help with that one because it was such a large undertaking. I talked about the travel advice and advisories. Sorry, I had to play. So yeah, every country, I would suggest, ladies, that you're about to travel, take a look. Honduras and Mexico, take a look and see what we've got for those different places. Things that we do for Canadians who are traveling, and you're plugged into the Rotary Club down there, but the consulate down there would be able to do this too. If you ever had a medical emergency, you can call the consulates. They have a list of doctors that can serve in English and French that might be familiar with the Canadian system. So they'll have a list of lawyers if you need that. We maintain contacts for people because if you're there and you don't know anything, right, about where you are, what's going on, we have lists of people that have helped Canadians in the past that we have reasonable confidence in the services that they provide. One of the things we do is we do a lot of contacting of family back in Canada. So we'll see this a lot with backpackers, for example. You know, you're in university and you say, I'm going to go see the world. You start backpacking across Europe and your family loses touch with you. The backpacker, if they get in trouble, they lose their wallet or money or their cell phone or something like that, they can reach out to the consulate and then we can be the middleman to put the communication back together. They can send us messages and we can talk to the family if they can't talk to them directly. It's not so much of an issue anymore now that everyone has, you know, one or even two phones on them at any given time. With satellites and, you know, Zoom and everything like that, that's kind of going away, but it still happens in our remote areas. People, like I say, you'll find Canadians everywhere in the jungles, mountains, you know, everywhere. So we do some of that. Again, not so much in the US. That's not one that we do too much, but it's good to know it's there out in other countries. Death abroad, it happens. If you know, for me, it's a lot of traffic accidents. We have I-75, Interstate 75, which starts in Michigan and ends in Tampa, Florida. A lot of snowbirds, a lot of March break folks traveling down there. It happens. So we will work with families of the deceased to repatriate their remains back to Canada so they can be with their loved one here. So we do funeral arrangement, that kind of thing, to get their remains back. Yeah, it's again, hope you never need it, right? We talked about citizenship. We talked about voting. Yep. Services. What we don't do, a lot of people think, like I heard you say, Bill, oh, Mark will come and bail us out. I said, well, we will not do that. The government does not use taxpayer money to bail people out. We can't get you out of jail. We cannot, I can try and advocate for equal treatment, like I mentioned, make sure you get everything that you're entitled to, but I can't advocate for special treatment, right? Just because you're Canadian, I can't get you, you know, the Globe and Mail in your prison cell, for example. You know, I can't work that merit. We don't pay for any expenses if you're traveling abroad. We won't make any travel arrangements for you, that kind of stuff. So rest assured, your tax dollars are not going for junkets around the world of other people. As I say, we don't do special treatment. We do get people ask for jobs. We get a lot of, believe it or not, we get a lot of calls from Canadians in even in Windsor, just saying, hey, can you help me get a job in Detroit? We don't do that. We're not a job service. The Emergency Watch and Response Center. That's what I was talking about in Ottawa. It is staffed 24/7. That's a good place. It's open 24/7, so you don't have to worry about the time zone. And if you don't know the contact details for the consulate where you are, It's always good advice. Nobody ever does it, but it's good advice to plan ahead, find your Canadian representatives before you go. Oh, okay, in Honduras, this is the embassy there, and in Mexico, this is the consulate where I'm gonna be. Again, nobody does that, but it's a good piece of advice. If you don't have that, then take the number for the emergency watch center. They'll take calls even from Mexico. The nearest consulate for you obviously is Detroit. So if you ever find yourself over in Michigan, you'll likely talk to me. I'm a team of two. It's myself and my assistant Oriana, who's the one with the car trouble today. So if you ever need any assistance in Michigan, I'm your guy. I deal with emergency passports. Don't need it too much. I'll tell you because you're a perfect audience for this. If you ever do lose your passport and you're over in Michigan, you don't need a passport to get back to Canada. Just go to the border. Even if you've lost everything, if you've been robbed or lose your purse or whatever that might be, just show up at the border and tell them if you've had your passport before, they can look that record up right at the border. So we're very lucky here that you don't need that. But other places don't have that luxury. So if you're down in Florida and you lose your passport and you don't have any ID to get on that plane home, then you're going to need the consul to help you. Get your passport, get your ID so you can get on that plane. But here, if you're just driving, just go right to the border. So we have a lot of ways to stay connected with us. We have Facebook, Twitter, our website there, this right there, you can subscribe. We'll send, if you subscribe, you get notifications of, you can pick the regions that you're traveling to, and then you'll get the notifications again. Keep using you as an example. They'll tell you what's going on, what they're aware of, and if something should happen while you're there. And the last one here is sign up for registrations of Canadians abroad. Nobody ever does this in our context because we know we're just hopping over the border for 3 hours. I'm not going to register with the government of Canada, telling them I'm going to Trader Joe's or something like that on the other side, right? But if you do that, then we know that there's a Canadian there, and if civil unrest or a natural disaster, what have you happens, we know to look for you. And also you can put all your emergency contact details, your passport number, all of that stuff. So we have all of the tools that we need to get you back together again in an emergency rather than you running around trying to find it in the middle of a pressure situation. That's about it for my presentation. But the one thing I wanted to add is a piece of advice is that you should get travel insurance if you haven't already. Even just going over the border, I've seen it so many times. People go over and you don't think about it, but I've had clients that have had, they go over the border shopping for 3 hours and they have an aneurysm, and now they're in a Michigan hospital, and I think of like a taxi cab meter. The bill is just doing this; it's just spinning, and OHIP only covers so little when you're overseas or abroad or over river, as it were. So that's the best advice I can have for you is to get travel insurance. You'll save yourself a lot of hassle. They'll do a lot of the arrangements for you, make a lot of the travel plans. And if you need to be medically repatriated with a doctor on your airplane or something like that, the insurance company will take care of that. So
You can purchase that too.
Yes, depends. Every company's different, but you could buy a day pass, a week pass, a 30-day pass, an annual pass. That's the cheapest way to do it. Yeah, absolutely. So if I had one piece of advice, if there's one thing you take away today, it's that. As soon as you cross that border, you're not in Kansas anymore, or not Canada anymore. Yeah, it's what happens is trouble. Could be trouble.
I've got,
Yeah.
hopefully a good question.
Sure.
But also I saw a screen light up. I don't know if there's a question from somebody on the screen. I don't know what it was.
Okay.
It went up on chat and it's gone. So
Okay.
maybe Jerry might.
Oh,
It was a
maybe
comment.
it's
It was a
a
comment.
comment.
It was a comment. Okay, because I could read it.
Yes.
My question is, the people that you've had to evacuate, let's say Hawaii as the example,
Yep.
or.
Yep.
Or somebody's lost stuff, like pay forward and somebody's got to pay you back. How does
Yep.
the money happen with
Yep.
that?
That's actually, I'm actually surprised. This is the official presentation they put together. And I'm surprised they didn't put it in here. There's something called the Distressed Canadians Fund, DCF. It is a pocket of money that Global Affairs has, and we can draw from it. It is a loan. So if a Canadian who is in distress absolutely has no recourse to any assistance on their end, the first thing we'll do is we'll say, you have family and friends that can help you. I mean, in this day and age, it's so easy to transfer money with Interac and everything else. You can email money like that and they have it. But if there are people who have nothing, they've lost everything, we can do a loan to get you back. The only purpose for that loan is to repatriate you back to Canada. It's not to, you know, I'm in Florida. I came for a week. I'd like to stay for 2 more. Can I have a loan? No, that's not what it's for. We had a good example is we had a family that they were living in a Winnebago. That's what they was they were living in this Winnebago and they just traveled around and that's how they did it. That was their life. And they were from Quebec and they were down in Arizona, I think, and their Winnebago burned to the ground. So it was literally everything they owned and they had no bank accounts or nothing like that. So that's a good example of a DCF. You would give them a loan to get back to their home.
Interest free.
It is interest free. It's interest free for the short term because it's expected to be repaid. But if there is an interest, it does kick in after a period of time. If I'm not mistaken how that works. Yeah, it's for the short term. It's free. Yeah.
Can you just unshare your screen? So that-
Unshare my screen. Oh yeah. Share. Yep. Sorry. Ooh.
Okay, 2 questions.
Sure.
First, how can we get a copy of that presentation outside of waiting for the video or whatever? Can you share
Yeah,
that presentation?
absolutely. Yeah.
Could you share it with the club? Or-
Absolutely.
Okay, that'd
Yeah,
be
in
great.
fact, I've already emailed it to Leanne, so she's got it.
Okay, all right, yeah, that would be great.
Terry.
Terry.
I beg your pardon.
We didn't find her for that.
Oh, you fooled me. You got an ink pickup.
Over your shoulder.
Yes, I did.
So Mark, my second question is, who determines the extent of the travel advisory? So like, let's say we're going to Tanzania
Yes,
and there's a travel advisory there for Canadians.
yes,
But yet our daughter lives there and she says what she hears from all the Canadians there
yes,
is that the travel advisory is often exaggerated.
yes.
So how does that get determined?
Headquarters, the folks at headquarters at the Emergency Watch Center that maintain those communicate with the embassies and consulates on the ground in that country. So they will ask the staff that are literally feet boots on the ground, what is happening, what is the situation. The other thing you have to remember is the travel advisories are often national and there might be a hot spot, right? There might be one part of the country where there's an issue. And so if they do a travel advisory, it might say, okay, careful of travel
In
to
this region?
country X, but it might be more vague or more overarching when it's really just one specific area. A good example of that is you'll see it sometimes for some of the Central American areas with maybe like dengue fever or malaria or something like that. Those are not going to be an issue in cities, in urban areas, right? So if your travel is going to be mainly in cities and you're not going to get out into the country, into the jungle or the deep woods. So
Chances are you're pretty safe.
right, you just have to, your specific travel may not fit exactly what the advice is. So just be
Okay.
cognizant of that.
No, you don't. I just voted.
About him growing up in Buffalo or something. Yeah, did you ever come down to this?
Hey.
I love Buffalo. A 4-way test for the saver. Yeah, not the Super Bowl this year. I'll be fine. How many of your services are done digitally now? Has it changed?
So in some respects, we've gotten a lot better. Things are going digital. Right now, you still can't apply for a passport digitally, but they're flirting with that. They're test piloting some things like that to start being able to apply online for your passports. If you've had a passport before and it's a simple renewal, it's kind of routine. So that is something that they're test piloting to work on. A lot of our services are done. You can all the applications now are all online. even citizenship applications, you can submit a citizenship application for a child born abroad. You can do that online now. That's just in the last couple of years that's happened. So the pandemic was a push. So I guess that's one good thing that came out of it.
Mark, this week we had a Canadian citizen stopped on the US side of the Ambassador Bridge with, we'll call it $7 million worth of cocaine. Why should the Canadian government have to offer any services to this gentleman that so viciously broke the laws?
So this was a US citizen?
I don't think it's Canadian at all.
Canadian citizen.
Well, I can speak generally. I know the case that you're talking about, but in that case, he's not actually a Canadian citizen, so.
From India?
Yeah, so the Indian authorities will provide consular assistance to a person like that. But that situation, I have a lot of those. As I said, I have about 50 people in prison. The Ambassador Bridge is a big source of my work. Trucker, I get a lot of people who will say, hey, I'll give you $5,000 to take this box over the border and put it in your semi truck or whatever it is. Okay, sure, seems like a great idea. Now you're gonna get 10 years of Uncle Sam's hospitality, but that's where we are. So Canadian citizens are entitled to consular assistance. Every citizen of every country gets assistance from their own country, just to make sure that they are, again, treated fairly under the local laws.
I guess there are a couple of things. One is everybody's innocent until proven guilty. And that doesn't apply in all countries.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, you don't want to, even if they are guilty, you don't want them treated worse than passport foreign citizens in that country.
You don't want, exactly, you don't want them treated worse because they're Canadian. That's what we're after, is to make sure that they're getting treated at least the same as a local citizen.
Thank you.
During COVID, did you get a lot of activity from Canadians who were abroad that just couldn't get out of the country because of COVID?
Yes, absolutely. In the early onset, you might remember the government, they took the Distressed Canadian Fund and that I mentioned about that loan program, they came up with a whole new loan program just for COVID. Because there were so many people abroad. You will remember the Prime Minister gave a speech to all Canadians and said, if you're abroad, come home. And the day of that speech, that's when what I do just exploded, because all of a sudden everybody's trying to come home. If they came home right away, it worked really well. But if they waited too long, what started happening is, you'll all remember, borders started closing. Planes cancellations, flight cancellations. So all of a sudden, where there might have been 5 flights a day to Toronto from country X, now there was only 1, and there still as many people that wanted on those 5 flights, but there's only 1. So there was a lot of that. So we did a lot. There was a temporary loan program just for COVID to get people who, by no fault of their own, were over. They had a return ticket. They had plans to come back. They were ready to do it, but they couldn't execute their plan because all the flights were canceled in the middle of their trip. So they did extend the loan program for that, to get those people, a couple of more days in a hotel until that one flight opened up for them. So there was a bottleneck at the beginning, and there was a loan program to help those people. It is done now, but yeah.
Mark, are your services offered in any manner for the visiting migrant workers in the greater Leamington area?
No, again, the Canadian Consular Services are strictly for Canadian citizens. So if they are from whatever country they would be, their consulate in Canada, wherever it would be, probably Toronto is usually where they're located. So their consulate would be providing the
So a work permit or an international student, you're not extending any blanket.
Yeah. Right. I should mention that Global Affairs Canada, Consular Services, is not Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, IRCC. That's the ministry that is responsible for visas. We do not, at our office in Detroit, we do not have any staff of IRCC. So once upon a time we did, for 2012, there was a visa and immigration office. I think, Bill, you and I were talking about this, or maybe it was Bob, I can't remember. We were talking about, you had an exchange student and you had a contact. Yeah. There used to be a visa office in Detroit, no longer since 2012. So that's not a service that my office can provide. There are two in the US, the Consulate in New York and the Consulate in LA. They offer visa services for Canada.
Thank you.
Anybody on Zoom?
That's so right.
Oh, I guess that's it. I guess we're pulling the hook.
Okay, excellent. And Terry, I apologize for mixing up your name. I read your name.
Oh, that's okay.
No, Mark, I just wanted to thank you for kind of speaking. There are a couple of things that I didn't know about was one is registering for growing abroad, and there are a number of us taking cruises and trips this winter. And I didn't know about that. I'm not gonna do that,
Cruises in particular are a good, Bill, because especially Caribbean, there's so many different countries. Every stop's a different country. Very important.
It's true. The other thing I'm just gonna throw in is you mentioned travel insurance, which is not something to do. But travel insurance, I'm just thinking of a cruise that I took a year and change ago. Where we were sailing between Rio de Janeiro and Buenos Aires. And the ship got diverted, and so we ended up going to El Salvador in Brazil, a city I'd never heard of. But imagine how much it costs to divert a cruise ship and then get taken off, go to a hospital, and then brought back home. That would be tens of thousands of dollars. So that's an addition to. So in any case, thank you very much. So, and a token of our appreciation, which we give to speakers, since we're a green club, got some nice natural honey here for you to enjoy.
Thank you.
And whenever you join us, we're gonna be taking from you, not giving.
Well, can you let me?
Oh,